This story takes place in the early 2000s. My wife and I had just purchased our first home in Henderson, Kentucky. It was just a small shotgun house, but it was home, and it was cozy, and it was cheap. At first, the odd little things that started happening were minor. Things like cabinet doors somehow opening on their own, the nearly inaudible voices that seemed to come from the back room, and the occasional cold spots around the house. I just dismissed these things with one rational explanation or another. These little incidents went on for months, though. Then the events started to escalate. Items began to go missing. My keys, for example, disappeared for almost 3 weeks, only to reappear in the middle of the dining room table. My wife swore to me that she had not put them there. The cabinet doors began to close loudly, usually in the middle of the night. We had an aquarium that unexplainably had been knocked over, soaking the carpet in water and broken glass and killing our fish. A feeling of dread would come over the both of us for no reason at all. We both began to lose sleep, and in turn, this started to affect our relationship. She and I had always been able to talk our problems out in the past with a minimum of fighting and hurt feelings. But these days we were having knock-out, drag-out fights on a regular basis. The bad vibes between us only seemed to intensify the weirdness that we were already experiencing. On one cold particular night, my wife had called to tell me she would be working late and not to wait up. So I didn't. I was so tired due to my lack of sleep lately, so I just went to bed. At some point, half asleep, half awake, I noticed that our dining room light was on. I figured she had come home from work and was sitting at the table reading as she often did to unwind after a long shift. I managed to fall back asleep. I was awoken by my bedroom door being flung wide open. The light from the dining room poured into the room. I tried to roll over and get to my feet to see what had just happened, but I couldn't move. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced sleep paralysis before, but it's terrifying under normal circumstances. But this was definitely not normal circumstances. I laid there, helplessly, willing my body to move, but to no avail. That feeling of dread I had been experiencing was now full-on fear. I could sense something horrible in the next room, some kind of evil presence, and it wanted me. I felt my heart begin to race, my hair stand up, my eyes well up with tears, as I desperately tried to take control of my body. I managed to barely wiggle a couple of my fingers. Then I saw it. It was standing in the doorway, a man-shaped thing, but at the same time not. I could see right through it. It looked like rising heat, a mirage-like figure, something cloaked in shadow and distortion. It lingered there for a few moments more before stepping into my room. I felt my mattress shift as it stepped upon my bed. Looming over me, the specter knelt down, straddling me. I could feel its weight pushing down on my midsection. The figure leaned close to my face, sniffing me. I could feel its frigid breath upon my face. It placed a nearly invisible hand on the side of my head, turning it back and forth, almost like it was playing with me. It leaned in close, its distorted face now just inches from mine, and I heard it smack its lips and let out a soft hiss-like sound. I'm struggling, trying to move. I closed my eyes and tried to shout, "No!" The word came out little more than a soft whisper. I struggled harder. My head, I could move my head. I shook it violently, breaking the iron grip from this shadow that had a hold of me. My voice became stronger. "No! No! No!" I screamed as I continued to thrash my head wildly. I could feel the paralysis begin to let go of me. I slowly regained control of my body. It screeched into my face as I tried to sit up. Another strong hand came down on my chest, pinning me to my bed. I gathered my strength and pushed as hard as I could, pushing this entity off of me. I rolled onto one side, breaking the mount of this thing. I kept rolling until I reached the edge of the bed and stood up. I had not fully regained my motor skills. taking a couple awkward steps forward, reaching for the light switch. The light illuminated the room, and I turned to face my tormentor. It stood there, towering over me. It let out a high-pitched squeal, almost deafening me, and lunged towards me. Instinctively, I jumped backwards, colliding with my wife's dresser, one of the knobs digging into my lower back hard. The pain, it just barely registered. It was upon me now. I reached behind me, searching for anything I could use to defend myself with. My hand made contact with something solid. I grabbed the box-like object and flung it as hard as I could into the apparition. As the object traveled through the air, it became several objects. Gold and silver sparkled and flashed in the bedroom lights for a few seconds. That seemed like an eternity. I had thrown my wife's jewelry box. The wooden box hit the floor and tumbled to the wall with seemingly no effect. But this stopped the apparition in its tracks. It stopped moving forward and let out a scream of pain. I could only stare as the holes began to form in the dark figure's cloak. It screamed again and exploded into mist and vanished from my sight. I slumped to the floor, trying to catch my breath and fathom what had just transpired. I stood up and mustered all the courage I could, and tentatively walked over to where the thing had been. I looked over the area and saw nothing but a few stains on the carpet. I knelt down to examine the specks closer. The stains were wet droplets of something. I reached out and touched one of the spots. It was slimy and cold to the touch. I raised it to my nose and sniffed. It smelled like sulfur. I wiped the slimy substance onto my pajama pants and walked to the spilled jewelry box. It was not broken, just empty from its tumble. I knelt and picked it up, deciding I should get everything back into order before the missus got home. I had just been in the fight of my life and didn't want another one just yet. I began picking up the loose jewelry from the floor, depositing it back into the box. A gold ring, some diamond gold earrings I had bought her for our first anniversary, a gold chain, and then moved on to the next. Her grandmother's antique silver necklace was lying on the floor, under the corner of the bed. I picked it up, and the heirloom was covered in that sticky goo that I had found on the floor earlier. In fact, after closer examination, all the silver pieces were coated with that substance. I thought. I stayed up the rest of the night, thinking about what had happened, and waited on for Teresa to come home. I just wanted to see her, especially to a freshly cooked breakfast, her favorite, eggs over easy, waffles, and black coffee, and a carefully planned sales pitch on how we needed to invest in silver.